Hi everyone, and welcome to this Coronavirus Conversations, Future of Museum Learning and Engagement. Hope everyone can hear me, so I was just checking I'm not actually on mute. My name is Rebecca Atkinson for the Museum Association, and I'll be facilitating today. I can see some people are still coming in, so apologies for that. I should have pressed the broadcast button earlier, but hopefully the numbers are sort of, we're getting there in terms of people that are attending. This is actually our 6th in the series of COVID-19 themed webinars. We've previously looked at reopening museums and the future of our workforce, among other things. And today we'll be discussing how the sector might rethink our learning and engagement offers as we move beyond total lockdown and reopen our doors to visitors. Before I hand over to our chair, I've just got a few quick housekeeping announcements to make. Firstly, although your cameras and microphones are automatically disabled, you should be able to see a list of participants via the link in the menu bar. And you can also use the chat function on your menu bar to talk to others, share links and your experiences during today's conversation. You can also tweet using the hashtag #MACoronavirusConversations. If you've got a question that you'd like the panel to address, then please share this via the Q&A. You should be able to see this in the menu bar. You can ask a question anonymously, but if you're happy to, then please share your name and organisation if relevant. The chair will then put selected questions you've asked to the panel, so please keep these short and to the point to help her out. You can leave and rejoin the webinar at any time today, and we are recording discussions, so it will be available after the event on our website. Finally, please bear with us if there are any technical problems, and do feel free to send me a private chat message if you have any troubles. Right, I'm going to hand you over now to Dhikshana and our panel to get started.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and thank you for the MA for planning and organising today and managing all the tech. That's going to keep us in safe hands, I'm sure. And thank you to all of you for joining us as well, hopefully with some respite from the heat out there, and we can talk about some learning and engagement. So as Rebecca gave you the housekeeping rules, as we go through, I'm going to do a bit of an introduction, introduce our panellists. I'm going to start off with a couple of questions, and then I'll go to the audience for some questions as well. So do start popping them into the Q&A, and then I can look through them. So today's topic, I'm Dhikshana Pering. I'm head of learning and head of engagement and skills at Somerset House. I'm also an MA board member, and it's a privilege to be your chair today. And today's event, as we know, is about learning and engagement. I just wanted to set the scene with a bit of work that the MA has been doing. I shouldn't say a bit of work, it's quite a big piece of work that they've been doing over the last 19 months, and then give a bit of context of this year of 2020, which is turning out to be very interesting in many ways. So for the last 19 months, the MA has been working on a piece of work called the Future of Learning and Engagement. They've spoken to over 300 members across all 4 nations. They've worked with GEM, Engage and Art Fund, consulting their memberships and their work that they're doing around learning and engagement as well. They developed the Future of Learning and Engagement Manifesto, which will have a framework and case studies aligned to it, and will be launched later this year alongside the online MA conference that will happen towards the end of this year as well. We're still looking for case studies, specifically from these last 8 months that have really responded to coronavirus, to Black Lives Matters, to 2020. So if yourselves are part of them, or you know of really great work that's been happening, please do pop it in the chat or get in touch with the MA, because we're still collecting those case studies. There's also an aim to look for funding to do some research, not just of what's happened in 2020 and how museums and galleries, and sorry, the police are just driving past, I'll let them go before I continue. Not for me, I'll let you know. And so there's some aim to collect some, do some research around Black Lives Matters and coronavirus and the impact it's had on museums and galleries and our communities and the work that we're doing. So we'll keep you updated on that as well. And finally, on September the 25th, 2020, we're holding an event specifically for heads of learning and engagement or learning managers within organisations to talk about the learning and engagement work, the journey so far and the next steps, as we want everyone to be kind of part of those next steps and seeing the manifesto and putting it within, acting it within their organisation. So again, please pop things into the chat function if you're interested, and we'll get in touch with you. We will be promoting it as well once our new website is up and live, which will be shortly too. So back to right now and back to 2020 and the impact of coronavirus and Black Lives Matter 2020 specifically, 2 really important things that have happened this year that really changed the way that learning and engagement and museums and galleries have had to respond. I think what's really crucial that we've seen is that the minute we were put into lockdown, it was our learning engagement and our digital teams that were looked to come up with ways to carry on our work. when we couldn't do it within our buildings ourselves. We already had outreach initiatives and other things other organisations were already doing, but even those, because they involved contact with people, were difficult. So it was thinking about these digital offers and other ways to engage. That was with lockdown. With Black Lives Matters, we saw a rise up from people saying, my voice is not represented, or you are telling the story of me or my background in the wrong way. And there was a call to action. And we saw organisations respond to that as well. We saw them respond and put statements out. But there was a difference this time, and perhaps it's what living in a pandemic does. This time, it was a statement was not enough. It was not just about making a commitment, but it was showing real action. How are you going to really fulfill that pledge or that statement that you made or that announcement that how you're going to change something? And I think that's really important. And for me, that's been something I hope that when I say something within the work I do, that I will do it, or I will come around the barriers and hope to do it. But I think that's that real shift from the public, our community asking for what we're doing and why we're doing that. And so I guess as we come into the new norm or a storm or whatever buzzword that's going to come out, as we look ahead, I guess it's really important on two fronts, which is what we say and how we do it, and how we answer to our communities is going to be even more important. So with that as my last comment, and you can stop, this is a conversation, it's not a monologue, so let's go to the other members of this panel to speak. I want to introduce our panel and then we'll kick off with some questions. So first up, and if you guys, I know your names are on screen, but if you just give a wave when I introduce you, just so everyone's aware who you are. I'm going to start with Claire McDade. Claire McDade is currently project manager at the Skylark 9 Recovery Trust based in Dumbarton in Scotland, and works with those in recovery and those marginalised by society to restore a Dunkirk little ship. And what I love most about that is their tagline is recovery through recovery, which is a lovely tagline. She has built a career spanning 25 years with a focus on audiences, outreach, interpretation and learning, and held senior positions within cultural organisations. What makes her passion, what gives her goosebumps, is that she sees people taking part in learning activities and that they are so inspired by it. When she sees a person or a group respond to being in that historic environment, transfixed by what they are learning, coupled with the prospect of new skills and opportunities they will develop. Next up, we have Dianna Djokey, who is a communities curator at the John Hansard Gallery in Southampton, also an MA board member, so a privilege to sit with her on our board, as well as be here together here today. And is part of an artist curator collective called Stair Slide Space. Dianna's central practice includes community participation, co-curation, learning and engagement, and developing tangible ways for communities to engage with the arts. She is passionate about serving people, telling stories, and making sure with the support of the arts, they are able to meet their maximum potential. Next up, we have Jude Holland. Jude, who is our learning manager for Barnsley Museums, an MA rep for the North and alumni from MA Transformers programme. She has worked across learning, interpretation, and community engagement, and has worked in local authority, independent, and national museums. Jude is passionate about social justice, tackling loneliness and social isolation, and how stories and people share in shopping centres, community centres, and our high streets have the power to change lives. Nia Williams is Director of Public Programmes at Amgueddfa Cymru National Museums, Wales. She has over 30 years experience in Wales in formal and informal education. She steered the new strategic vision for St Fagan's National Museum of History, which was awarded the Art Fund Museum of the Year in 2019. Nia is passionate about the potential of heritage, culture and arts to transform people's lives and lead the museum's involvement with the well-being of the Future Generation Wales Act 2015. That is our lovely panel that is joining us, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to kick us off with a question, and I'll come to all of you to answer. I'll pick you at random just to keep you on your toes. So the first question is, what has the impact of coronavirus and Black Lives Matter been so far on learning and engagement? Shall we start with you, Claire?
Oh, yep. Well, like everybody else, everything stopped when coronavirus happened. We were about to start building some boats, teaching people how to build boats in a workshop at the Scottish Maritime Museum in Dumbarton. I'd just recruited a boat builder, and we were going to work with our recovery clients from the Drug Recovery Service, and that all stopped. And also the restoration of the little ship, the Dunkirk little ship that we've got, that's down at the other site that Scottish Maritime Museum have in Irvine, and that stopped too. So impact wise, obviously, you know, we had a couple of weeks of scrabbling around, and then we just had to turn it around, and we didn't furlough, we didn't stop, and we were always mindful of the recovery through recovery, the Dunkirk spirit thing that, you know, imbues the project that I'm working on. And it was a sense that we're not going to get beaten by this, by hook or by crook. We're quite bloody minded, and we just thought, I'm a heritage professional that's embedded within a recovery service, and it's a totally different model from anything I've ever done before. I've always worked in museums, in heritage organisations, and now I'm working in a drugs recovery service. And there's just no way I could say, well, I'm going to stop. This was too important, because this is about the people whose lives we are trying to impact on. These people, nothing can stop just because coronavirus was happening. So the people, the clients we were working with, went into lockdown 2, into the residential house that we run. And I was able to create Zoom tutorials. The boat builder managed to repurpose entirely what he was doing and create online Zoom boat building tutorials. And last week we launched mini kit boats that we've made over lockdown on Loch Lomond. And this week we've gone back in and started to fit out the workshop now that the museum's reopened. And we've just kept going. In terms of Black Lives Matters, I think generally speaking, it's expectations. Everybody's expectations have been raised. Personally, I've been working in trying to broaden representation in museums of people from all communities over the years. And often I've seen it that it's just individuals trying to fight that battle. And I want to see our organisations, our whole institutions changing what we do, because it's not good enough anymore. As you said, Dhikshana, it's not good enough for us to just be paying lip service. And it's got to imbue everything that we do from now on. And also we've got to be listening to people far more too, because I think cat's out of the bag, and it has been for many years, but I think that realisation has really hit people. And so it's been tumultuous, isn't it? I'd say that's probably my word of the day. It's certainly been a very, very invigorating and exciting and extremely terrifying ride at times. And I hope things are going to change to the better as a result of all this.
Thank you very much. Dianna, can we go to you?
Yeah, sure. So with coronavirus, we had the gallery shut down completely in March, and that included all of our exhibitions. And so we kind of had to think about how we were going to engage with our communities, not in a face-to-face contact. And so a lot of what we did ended up moving online. Now that looks different in many ways. For example, when it came to our exhibitions program, it became films that we had commissioned artists for, and they were able to display on the gallery website. For the learning and engagement, we had face-to-face projects that were happening, and we had to transfer that from face-to-face online. And so Zoom has been a really great way for us to do that. So for example, we had an interruptions disruption series that included a writer in residence who was with us and part of a Voices in the Gallery project in partnership with Southampton University. And for a few weeks, they were meeting face to face. And then we had to kind of translate so much of what we were doing face to face online on Zoom. And so we were able to adapt the workshops to Zoom, and we had sessions via Zoom, and we worked with the creative writers and them being able to respond to the exhibition even though it had shut down. And so for us, we worked with the writer in residence on producing prompts and resources for them to have something to respond to. So when they came to the session, they were able to engage in conversation. And so towards the end of those workshops that we ran, they were able to produce poet pieces for us, and that was broadcasted on our website. And so also we've been doing artist talks for the online films that we've been showing, and that's been going well. That's been going on a webinar framework. With working with Zoom, we've developed a safeguarding toolkit, not only for ourselves, but we're more than happy to share that out to other organizations. Like, for example, we've shared it with Black History Month volunteer organization, and they're putting on a Zoom talk as well. And so we've been trying to find ways of continuing our partnership with people, especially with our ambassadors program, where we were meeting face to face, but we end up having to adapt our meetings to Zoom, but then also adapt workshops that they've been involved in on Zoom as well. So we've had to adapt and be as flexible as possible while still keeping our connections with people. In regards to Black Lives Matter, two of us within the learning engagement team, myself and then my line manager, have joined a task force that's been developed, because for us what's really important is that there's support, that there's accountability and partnership, because we're also part of Southampton University. And one of the things that we're wanting to address is being able to have, what we noticed actually is, whilst being in the task force, there isn't a process for people to complain and basically say, this is what's taken place, this is what's happened to me. And so one thing that the task force would like to address is being able to work with University of Southampton to develop that process. So when there is something discriminative or racist happening, there's a process for people, not only staff members, but also people who visiting the gallery would have a process for us to address the situation. But then also in that moment, the person who is bringing forward that complaint has the support as well, because it is emotionally taxing on that person to go through that and then not have the support, but then also having prompt response to it, not waiting long periods of time for something to kind of happen in order for you to take action. And so for us, I know a lot of museums and galleries have put out lip service and statements, but for us what was really important is that our statement was our action. And so what are we going to do to make sure that not only we as a gallery are addressing racism and discrimination in a way that's actually tangible and efficient, but then also how are we supporting Black artists as well, and people of color who hasn't been able to kind of function well within the sector that has been held back so long because of these things.
Thank you very much, Dianna. I think there were some comments around sharing your toolkit, so I'm sure we can get that in and share that as well. So thank you. Let's go to Jude next.
Yeah, so in Barnsley Museums, we've also been working through lockdown. I just wanted to also though acknowledge all of those people who've been on furlough, for whom, you know, they're in a very different situation, no less valid. So I think that's something that the sector will need to deal with moving forward, and equal support for kind of those who are working through and those who've been on furlough. Again, similar experiences of moving our programme online. And sort of thinking about a lot of the issues in terms of Barnsley, which has been particularly kind of adversely hit, I think, in terms of COVID, which we know is a disease that, you know, affects people in areas of deprivation, you know, even more starkly. So I think we've seen that that toll taken on some of our community partners whose capacity's been stretched. We've seen referrals to a lot of our council services massively increased during that time. So I think there's a need more than ever for us to support those things. As well as, you know, bringing a lot of our family learning and schools learning online. I think one of the big challenges for us in Barnsley has been digital poverty. So we've been looking at a dual approach in terms of how we respond to COVID. We've been running Zoom sessions, supporting our refugee and asylum seeker ESOL sessions, and working with some of our young carers. But we've also been sending out sort of support and care packs to families in areas of deprivation across Barnsley, support with home learning, and with kind of creativity and wellbeing resources for young adults as well. So I think with COVID, there's been a chance to readdress our programmes as well, and look at kind of the areas of most need and what's working. And I think that's something that we're going to kind of continue to address moving forward. And maybe kind of, I think consultation is going to be even more important than it has been moving forward as well with our audiences. In terms of Black Lives Matter, I think I totally agree with, I think we now need to look at beyond those initial statements of support that museums made, which were very important, but to look at how we can incorporate that into all of our work, being much more proactively anti-racist. For me, as a white museum professional, I've been sort of very conscious of how to educate myself and look at being an ally. And there's some really useful resources out there. So I know Catherine, one of the other MA reps, has been looking at setting up a reading group around kind of anti-racist material, which I think is a great idea. And also, I think the MA, there are lots of good resources out there in terms of the Transformers toolkit, which has got some really good pointers around allyship as well, and obviously importantly, stepping back and offering space to listen, but then also being a proactive support at the same time, which was really something that came up in this week's Museums Hour as well.
Thank you very much, Jude. And again, finally, not least, Nia.
Well, very similar experiences to what's been said, really. We've closed 7 museums across Wales, and we're in the process of reopening at the moment. But I think in a way, being without the museum buildings has been liberating in some ways. I think it's enabled us perhaps to fast track some of the social practice and social justice as part of the purpose of the museum. And it's been interesting, really, to be a museum with no walls and thinking, what does the museum look like if the collections are based in hospital and in schools and in community? So we've been focusing on 3 sort of areas, really, in terms of assets and how we are quite asset rich in terms of collection, in terms of skills and resources, and how can we pool assets with communities and partners. So during this time, we've been working a lot with the health boards in Wales, the field hospitals in Wales, to share our collections into those hospitals, the artworks replicated on the walls, on the white walls of those hospitals, and in the rehab centres that have been developed in Wales. So I think in a way it's been a time where we've been able to fast track some of the partnership working, really working with like-minded organisations and coming together for the benefit of the communities and the people that we serve. We've also been able to really focus on who is it critical for us to work with now, and how does that change potentially who we work with in the future. We've focused a lot on supporting people facing the greatest disadvantage. At the moment, we're part of Kick the Dust, which is an initiative for widening access for young people, opening up the whole governance structures of museums so that young people's voice becomes central to that. So we've worked during lockdown with Llamau, which is a homeless charity in Wales, Bernardo's, Promo Cymru and others. And we've really moved most of the online work, of our work with young people, online. And actually it's created really different relationships and really been dynamic, and they've done sort of amazing work. And as part of that, the young people have been looking at reinterpreting some of our displays that are racist and that need to be addressed. And so we've been working with them on that. And then the last sort of area I thought I'd touch on is, I used to love to say, you know, we're the largest provider of learning outside the classroom in Wales. I'm not able to use that tag anymore because the schools haven't been able to come in, you know, the communities, the range of communities that we've been working with, we've really focused and narrowed down the areas where we're working during lockdown. So I think we also need to consider how we measure success. What should our KPIs actually look like, our key performance indicators? And is really the number as important as the depth? Obviously, we'd like to have both, but you know, during this time we've had to select, and we've gone for that deeper impact and outcomes-based approach, really, rather than the large numbers. And then in terms of Black Lives Matter, we made a statement. We don't want it to be, and it won't be tokenistic, and we are looking across the board, really, because this is about a whole organisational change. We're talking now about learning and engagement, and in Wales we've got a new curriculum coming in with Black Histories will be central in that new curriculum, and how we as a museum develop resources in support of that new curriculum. But we're also looking at our governance. Our governance is not diverse. The agency within the museum, the equity of use of us as a resource is not inclusive. And so that's something that we really need now to address. We've been talking about it for a very long time, and now is time for action, really.
Thank you very much. And the questions are rolling in from the audience, and I do want to move to them, but I just want to ask one question, and this is quite a succinct one to ask. What is the most positive thing that has come out from the way we've had to work in the last year that you think is going to change the way learning and engagement kind of moves forward? So I'll give you a second or two, but just one thing that you think is really going to change how learning and engagement plays out in the years to come. Dianna is nodding, so I'm going to go to Dianna first.
It was a nod to acknowledge your question, because that was a very good question. I would say probably the one positive thing is it's been really great to see some museums and galleries become more active within the community, whether that be with facilitating art packs or resources for them, and really taking the opportunity of meeting them halfway and understanding their predicaments and experiences. If we can continue taking that on in the future, I think that will help us really build and further our relationship and rapport with our surrounding communities.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Jude, you're nodding now, so I'll go to you.
I think partnerships is something really positive that's come out of the current crisis. I think, and it follows on from, you know, what Dianna was saying. I think, you know, we've seen that big upswell in terms of community involvement, and then that's led to, I think, people in the sector talking to each other more. So in Yorkshire, we've had a lot more catch-ups with, you know, people from different learning and engagement departments sharing lessons learned. In terms of the packs that we sent out in Barnsley as well, that led to really new positive partnerships with the Schools Alliance, with family centres, with the early years team in the council, and with the council's local area teams as well. So I think we've got a better knowledge of kind of local needs from that, and new partnerships, although some partnerships have obviously been put under strain from the fact that there is that stretch on resources in the third sector, and that's something that we're going to have to work harder with. Something really positive is that new partnerships are emerging.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Claire, should we go to you?
Yeah, I'm struggling a wee bit on that one. I think there's been a huge shock this year, and we're all still reeling. I think the Black Lives Matter has been massive, and in my head I'm thinking that that's one of the best things, that museums, heritage organisations, we've been put on the spot and we've really been challenged, and I'm seeing brilliant responses coming out, and perhaps less so, and some people have been really exposed. So I think that is going to be rippling on for a long time. We'll see what comes. As Jude has said, and Dianna, about partnerships and listening to people, I think that is so important. I was talking to Paisley Museum the other day, asking them, you know, what's your take? How have you been impacted? And they're doing a big listening project as part of their development, which was fantastic to see. So I think us being a little bit more humble and listening a little bit more and just being a little bit more open, hopefully we'll see more of that continuing.
Brilliant, fantastic. Nia?
Yeah, no, I would agree, really. I think for me, the kindness, the collaboration, the way people have really, you know, pulled together to work in different areas. And I think for museums, the relationship with health for us has been really interesting during this time. In Wales, where we've got a Future Generations Commissioner, and she's focusing on having a wellness service rather than a health service. And I think, you know, museums have quite a lot to offer within that sort of approach, really.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to move to some questions that are coming in from the audience, and this has been touched upon by some of our panelists already, but it's an important one because I guess as we went into lockdown specifically, digital became really important, but as many of our participants, they are pointing out that, you know, not everyone has access to digital in the same way, so we aren't really reaching everyone. So the person that's asked this question hasn't put their name, so apologies that I can't reference you, but the question is have the panel experienced any cases of digital disenfranchisement or disenfranchised audiences, and if so, how have they overcome this? So I guess just to widen that up, is just in your practice, in your work, or any other areas that you've come across where, how are people or organizations, I should say, overcoming that digital disenfranchised audiences, which we know are out there. And while we've learned so much about digital, how do we still keep it there but make sure everyone is part of it, I guess? I'll start with Nia. I'll go to you as I keep going to you last. I'll start with you this time.
Okay, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, in Wales, 13% of families don't have Wi-Fi connectivity at home. So this was something that we were very aware of. We have been working with sort of some of the local schools and getting equipment out to those homes, but also developing non-digital opportunities as well. So and I know the museums have done this, Manchester have done this really well, I think, in terms of sending packs out. So we worked with local authorities in Swansea, for example, where we put the National Waterfront Museum and sent packs out with the sort of food packs that the local authority themselves were sharing. And we've got a community garden in Swansea as part of the museum, and people, you know, really missed the well-being that it gave them of being in that garden. So with the food packs, we sent out seed packs, and people have been sort of growing those at home, and then we hope in September now they'll all be able to come back and plant them in the garden. So we've done sort of different initiatives like that, but I think what this has done really is to highlight the huge, the gap really, and the digital disenfranchisement that is across the country really.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to answer? We don't need to answer them all, but if there's anyone, Jude, I know you had spoken a bit about that, but was there any?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Jude, you go.
So I go. So yeah, I mentioned the packs that we'd sent out to families. We also, one of the key groups that we work with as part of our MPO programme is older people at risk of social isolation, and particularly older people in care homes who, you know, we obviously know have been in crisis. One of the things that we did was we got a flat smart screen TV into one of the care homes, and we did some sing-along sessions that were able to happen in the care home digitally, so to be able to provide digital access that way. And we've also, with our refugee and asylum seeker ESOL group, there were quite a few members of the group who had limited or poor internet connections, so through both our own resources and council networks, we were able to provide and loan IT equipment that could help them get online. But I think also recognising that online isn't the best method for everyone to engage with. So as well as the packs that we sent out to families, we've sent out you know, resource packs to older people as well, based on our Barnsley Cares project, so with local history activities, images, top trumps cards, packs for the museums and things like that.
I just wanted to add, is that okay?
Yeah, of course, yeah, no.
Thank you. Just we ended up buying devices for some of our users, our clients, because they're our clients, so it's part of the project we've got funding for. But what we're finding still is that even with a nice smartphone, they don't have the data, they don't actually have the packages, they don't have the money to pay for the data. So that's a really basic problem, and you know, we're actually having to fund that side as well. We've also gone away from the digital side and launched a lockdown patchwork quilt project. So we wanted people to get involved in a crafts hands-on way too. And in fact, email was really useful. Going back to the old days of email, we sent out packs to people. We delivered things. We delivered patchwork square designs, and we've been getting them back in by post, but we've also just taken stuff out physically and delivered them to care homes, to individuals, to different organisations. And that's been wonderful. And now we're planning an open day on the 19th of September over at the Scottish Maritime Museum in Dumbarton, outside in their green space. So we hope it doesn't rain like it usually does up here. and B, well, hoping that we don't get lockdown Mark 2, and C, we hope people will come out to it, because we don't know yet if people will come to an open day, but we're trying to be positive and move forward with the non-digital as well, and move away from that gradually.
Dianna, did you want to say anything, or shall we move on to the...
You can move on, it's fine.
There'll be a chance for you to speak, don't worry. So actually the next question follows on, and there's a few different questions, so I'm blending them together. I guess it's this idea of this blended model, like that is in the new norm of where you have digital and hands-on, and how you mix that together. But I guess to frame that question, yes, you've got a blended model where you have digital and hands-on, but also what about as audiences like our school audiences, that, you know, the whole thing is about coming to the building and taking part in observing the collection or taking part in an event. So I guess my question to the panel is, what do you think the future for that looks like? What does this blended model that also invites audiences back, specifically, I guess school is an important one because that is an income generator for a lot of organizations. So yeah, I guess the question is just your thoughts on that. How do you have a hybrid model, but also work for these audiences? Dianna, do you mind if we start with you?
No, not at all. A lot of the work that we do at Hansard has been with schools, and we still have been in contact in a sense with schools. For example, with City of Sanctuary, there's been a project as part of community takeover called Your Flags, and we've been interacting with them via internet and being able to send over resources and downloading PDF for them to interact with, being able to create the flags that's going to be put up on social media. But one of the things that, considering we are a gallery that also welcomes schools and colleges and universities, is making sure that it's rebuilding that trust back into their surrounding and the people that they're surrounded by. And so one of the things that I think will probably be beneficial is being able to kind of have a protocol where they get to understand the risk assessments that are involved now, because those things will kind of change as well. How the gallery will, or the museum will be working in regards to how they're moving, how they're flowing, because that will have to change as well. And it's reassuring them in those things, because they'll have to take things into consideration. So for another example, what does a bubble look like? How many people are in that bubble? So for the gallery, for example, we're having an Eventbrite page where 30 people at a time on each hour probably will be able to come into the gallery. But what does that look like for a school? Because prior to that, we were able to welcome 90 kids, 120 easily max because of the space that we have. But now that we have COVID, they're going to be asking, okay, so how many students can we have? Also, in the materials, the resources that they'll be using, will we have to wipe down? Will we have to clean up? Will there be a kind of time where they'll be able to eat their lunch? And where would they be able to do that? How will they take place? And so they're going to be asking these questions. So I think being able to have that in somewhat prepared prior to them, before you connect with them and have that conversation, is kind of coming together as a gallery thinking, okay, how can we put this in place for them? Because they want to be reassured and being able to rebuild that trust with the organization.
Thank you very much. Nia, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I guess it's about working out what works best on digital, and what works well in terms of the physical, and in terms of that blended learning approach that we'll probably all be taking in the future. I think one of the dangers, something we need to be careful of, I think, is not slipping back to the old traditional methodologies of just sort of dumping information online. There's a huge challenge as we reopen our museums. You know, all the participatory elements that we had in the galleries will have to be removed because of the handling elements. And how do we make sure that that active learning that we've all sort of championed and developed over the last years really remains a part and comes back to be a part of that museum visit. So I think it's really important when we work online that we do that in a participatory way, that we put up our content to be rehashed, recreated, remade by the young people whose digital skills, you know, are usually amazing. We've just run a competition called Minecraft Your Museum, and the young people involved in that, you know, the fantastic architects of the future have come up with really amazing museums. So it's about sort of being generous, I guess, with our content as well, and letting people use it in the ways that meets their needs.
Claire, do you want to
there. Just like everybody else is saying, really, just finding ways to blend it, to do the hands-on if possible, as well as the digital. I know the Scottish Maritime Museum have been finding ways recently to make some sort of blended learning opportunities and doing stuff on paper. Saying earlier, my daughter I've just heard her come in. That's Scotland schools have gone back today. So she's just back in the door from her first day back at school. So I'll be finding out from her how's it all gone. And, you know, I doubt today they've been talking at all about trips out to museums. I think that's probably unlikely. But I'm hearing that probably museum trips from schools are not going to be happening for quite a while. So I guess we've got a bit of time to at least try and figure out how it's going to go once we're back in museums and just get the lie of the land. And then I know that some are saying it's not going to be until January. So I don't know whether that's true for every museum around the country at all, but certainly up here I'm hearing that quite a lot. So we'll just have to see how that goes.
I agree with you there. I think it's using time. So in the same way with Black Lives Matters, and we're looking at our recruitment practices, for example, at Somerset House, but we aren't going to recruit right now, but we can use this time to get everything in place so that when we do, we're ready to enact on it. So in the same way, if schools are not quite ready to come back, then we prepare everything, we have all the information ready, but when they're ready, we're ready to receive them, I guess. Is that kind of using this time as best as we can. Jude, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think just the importance of consultation, continued consultation with schools and flexing to what they need. And I think that's going to change over time. And, we've done quite a bit of consultation with teachers prior to schools going back, but I don't think that they're necessarily prepared for the challenges that are going to affect them and their students once they're back in the classroom. So an immediate priority for us is sort of in line with the recovery curriculums that schools will be focusing on. So thinking about how we can support students' wellbeing in the classroom. So we've developed a suite of wellbeing resources that can be used at the beginning and end of the day, that students can keep a journal alongside that to kind of record any thoughts and discuss those as a class as well.
Just following in, just looking at the questions again, there's a further question, which is the hands-on nature of a lot of that has been developed over the last 20 years, specifically, I guess, in the sector, with this idea of handling something in a collection, or interactive science galleries and places like that, which obviously in the age of coronavirus is, however, whatever safety measure you put in, is quite hard to kind of, I guess, get those open. So my question is, do you think that hands-on thing that was such an important part of the journey of learning and engagement for the museum and gallery sector is really going to, I guess, stop? Or if it changes, how does it change? Because fundamentally it's about holding something, isn't it? And we know at the moment that's not hygienic, I guess. So I guess my question to the panel is, what are your thoughts on the interactive, the handling, collections? So yeah, merging a few questions together there. Should we start with Claire?
Yes, it's a challenging one. We're going from please touch to please do not touch potentially again. I think a lot of it, from where I come from, I'm thinking a lot about creativity at the moment and how we create opportunities for people, children, adults, whoever, to get hands-on with making and doing. So, providing materials for people, we'll have to look at, I literally walked back in on Monday for the very first session, looking at how we're going to fit out a workshop to bring a group of people in to start boat building their own skiff, a coastal rowing skiff that we're going to have built. And there's a challenge ahead of us. We've got a very good budget for PPE, I'm pleased to say. We didn't realise we would have such a good budget, and it's come. And the National Lottery Heritage Fund, I must say, have been incredibly helpful and supportive of our project. So I'm looking at, obviously, putting gloves on if necessary, I guess, finding ways to touch and no interact with things, and also making is very important in my project. So providing resources, materials that, maybe within my project, it'll just be individuals that will have control of their own tools and their own equipment, and we'll work around that. I'm not working with wider groups at the moment, but that will come, and I'm not yet having to get my head around that. We have got teachers, school teachers on our trust, and I'll be talking to them in the next 2 weeks to find out from them, how's it going with your schools and how do we see this? Like I think Jude said, it's about that listening and consulting and finding out what's everybody's comfort zone at the moment, and how can we kind of extend it gradually and do it safely. But bottom line is we obviously have to work within coronavirus pandemic restrictions, and it may come back again in different outbreaks, so we just have to be, there's no point taking chances, I guess. We just have to be as super careful as we can, because it's about trust, and we need all our communities trusting us when it comes down to it.
I was hoping for a miracle answer. I think I was being...
I wish.
I'm conscious of time, and there's a really good question that I was leaving because I think it's a great way to kind of, I guess, end, because we are coming towards the end. And it was from Melissa Maynard, so thank you for this question. It came in right at the start, and I think it's really important for us to discuss. So the question is, and I'll read it as she's written it, in light of budget cuts, furlough and redundancies, how do the panel feel that the MA can support advocacy within the sector for learning, engagement, heritage learning? I think that's such an important question. At the start of lockdown, it was our teams that people went to kind of work out what to do. And obviously there is worry now as we reopen and things. So yeah, to the panel, what can the MA do? What can we do individually? Like we all have positions, powers that we hold. What can we do to for the next steps? So I think I'll start with Nia, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the political advocacy is actually key. And I think politically advocating across sectors, we've got a lot to offer the education portfolio, but also the health portfolio, and that we really start to join that up in terms of how we approach policymakers really in government who ultimately fund a number of us. I think that's really key. I think it's also quite key. It's been interesting the way funders have changed during this time. And the focus of funders has really, they've been really agile and really stepped up to the mark. And I guess in a way, as we move forward, many of us have spoken about change in the past, and about social justice, etc. And it's quite easy sometimes, I think, to actually get the funding for the words, not the action. So I think I would actually ask, that the funders become even more proactive, really, in terms of really funding good work. With outcomes, and not just work that pays lip service really to some of these agendas.
Thank you very much. Jude, would you like to answer?
I think, as learning professionals, we're probably all guilty of kind of spending so much time doing that we're not reflecting on practice, and we're not necessarily writing up case studies, interviewing participants and kind of really sharing good practice. I think with COVID, there's been a lot more democratisation of lessons sharing with lots more online learning. And for example, the Museums Association conference going online this year should open up participation to a lot more people. So I think that's a really good example of kind of, where we can kind of share case studies and learning to advocate for the sector. I'd say as well, in terms of the Museums Association, we have got regional reps across the country, of which I'm one. So if there's any ways that the regional reps can support, by hosting local learning sharing sessions and kind of help to feed into the advocacy that way, more than happy to get involved with that.
Dianna?
It's one of those complex questions, because I don't think automatically we'll all find the answer straight away. It's one that we're constantly going to be open. As long as we're having that conversation, I think it's really important. But when it comes to like the furlough, for example, I think the MA has done really well, even with their staff members, on being able to talk about furlough and being open and transparent, and wondered if they were able to share their practice on how they've gone about it, seeing if museums and galleries are able to kind of adapt that if necessary, because they've been really great on how they've been able to support their staff within when it comes to furloughing. When it comes to redundancies, I wonder if it'll be because you read a lot of what's going on when it comes to redundancies, and so many hundreds and thousands of people have been made redundant. But and I understand in a sense because like there's so many budget cuts happening, but at the same time, like the people that are being cut are so vital and so needed. And so I wonder if there can be support where an organization is able to come to the MA and ask if their approach of how they're wanting to deal with the budget cut is appropriate, because there's a lot of people who are struggling, and it seems like the cuts have been extremely brutal, not necessarily taking the human into consideration, not taking their work and their value into consideration. And so wondering if there could be a way or a guideline or somewhere that they could have a conversation with the MAs on their approach of redundancy or their approach of wanting to talk to their staff or finding ways of working their budget where, for example, in the beginning of COVID, there were so many people who were learning facilitators, freelance, that were being cut unfair in a way that left them kind of struggling and not knowing where their next money was going to come from. But if there's an approach where they can actually look at it in a way where they may be able to keep that person on or at least pay them for the rest of the time that they're there, finding an integral way of doing that, then I think it'd be really great if the MA can have that conversation with organizations and organizations finding some way of getting support to make sure that their approach is the right approach to take. I think maybe more options could be made available instead of automatically just cutting everyone and then not necessarily, you know, considering the impact of what they're doing.
Thank you. Claire.
I think that there's been an opportunity with all the Zoom stuff that's been going on to make more visible the work of learning and engagement. And putting it out on social media and on our websites, and you know, all the little mini films that you can make, you know, and I think that the more you make a noise about the work that you're doing and really promote it and put it out and make it incredibly visible, interview your audiences, get their buy-in, get them saying what's important to me about the work I get to do with the museum. I've done that a fair bit this year. We couldn't go to Dunkirk for the 80th anniversary in May, June, so we ended up going out and doing a sort of digital thing and inviting lots of people to send in their responses to what Dunkirk meant. The Dunkirk spirit was so important back in May when, you know, early in lockdown. And we kind of utilised that to a certain extent, and we made lots of mini short films and put them out on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And it was a highly visible way of demonstrating the activity that was going on our project, because otherwise we were invisible, and it kind of just linked people in and tried to make people feel engaged. And I think it's be political in what you do, you know, quite visibly political with a big P, small p, whatever, but you know, be sort of an activist in the way you work and make sure that your bosses see what's going on, and that they understand the value of the work. And if you have the voices of your users and the voices of your audiences coming in, that's really important because they're advocates for you too. So I think, you know, sort of a circular thing there, bring voices in and make sure that people upstairs are aware of this and feed it to the MA and let MA know what's going on too. And we're all part of that bigger conversation then.
Thank you very much. We're nearly at the end of our hour together, and thank you very much for everyone's questions. I'm sorry I couldn't ask all of them, but I did try and merge some together so we got through them, and thank you to our panelists as well. I just wanted to do a short summary, I guess, and I think what's really kind of struck me as the questions have come in, but also from your answers as a panel, is I guess that the biggest shift is that kindness and that transparency and that openness that has come across the last year. That was always there, but it's been pushed forward even more, is really important. And that advocacy that we need to do as for our part of the sector, that comes hand in hand with that. I think it's that the humbleness that comes with it as much as the activism. And sharing. I mean, there's so many people sharing projects and ideas and toolkits. Like, I guess it's about not duplicating the work, right? You know, it's happening out there. We're putting it somewhere that we can all use it or adapt it and collaborating, and hopefully that will create the right platform. And I think of the theatre sector and how they have advocated for themselves during this period, and just how we need to kind of follow suit with it, I guess, a little bit as well, and just make that time, like Jude said, to not just do the doing, but the kind of collecting and looking out and pushing it forward as well. So thank you for those thoughts, and thank you to everyone for those great questions as we went through. Just a reminder, I know some of you have already popped them in the chat. If you have any case studies or projects or things that have happened in the last year that are especially responding to coronavirus and Black Lives Matters, please do share them with the MA. Rebecca, I think, has put in the chat how best to do that, so that we can add them or include them as part of the Learning and Engagement Manifesto and framework and case studies. The event on September 25th, we will be sharing on the website as soon as that's up and running, and the information is there. So if you have put your details forward as being interested, you will hear more. We will make sure that it's shared with you. And finally, thank you all for joining us, and especially on a lovely day where you could have said you're working and just gone to the park. So thank you for joining us and speaking, and it's been a real privilege to be your chair. And yeah, that's it. I'm back over to Rebecca. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I won't, yeah, you've done all the thank you, so there's nothing much more for me to say other than, yeah, great questions, great discussion. The whole event's been recorded, so I'm going to get that online ASAP, hopefully tomorrow. But do keep an eye on our newsletter, because we'll make sure we put it in that. And yeah, we, like Dhikshana said, we've got more events coming up, so please do check those out. And yeah, hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much, and thanks to all our panelists. Bye.